Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Stellium Astrology Podcast. Today is an important and special episode of the podcast because the podcast turns 3 today. So I just wanted to celebrate a few little wins and to just go over, I guess, the progress of the podcast. Initially, the podcast was just audio only. And I launched it on iTunes and Spotify and all those platforms. And it's really weird because I was in a room talking to a microphone and I felt like I was talking to nobody. But I realize I'm reaching people because over the years I've met some great people. I've had some wonderful clients through this podcast, and it just feels like it just continues to gain momentum. So this exciting milestone I reached this week was that the podcast actually hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So I've not really been channeling as much energy into the YouTube channel as I could have. In fact, I launched on YouTube last year. I think it was for the podcast's 2nd birthday. I think that's when I launched it on YouTube. Either way, so it's been I've been putting content out on YouTube, but not as often. And I did take a small break at the beginning of this year. I just think this year I've had a Uranus transit opposite my moon and square my Aquarius stellium. So things got a little bit unpredictable for a while. And one of the things I just decided to take a step back from was just putting the podcast out as regularly, though I did put episodes out and I was still continually posting with my patrons. But I feel like I'm back on form with it all now. And I feel like I'm ready to keep on with the YouTube and, putting the podcast out on all the different platforms. And, it's something that I really love to do. I really love the podcast. It really feels like my baby. I've got the podcast and I've also got my little boy who was born around the 1st birthday of the podcast. So it's interesting that I have 2 babies in July, but my first one was my podcast, and I've very much poured a lot of love into it and a lot of time and energy. So I really care about how it, how it's going. And, I really, really care about helping people, and I really love doing what I do. So it's really nice that I've reached my audience, I've reached my people, and I'm continuing to do so. So first and foremost, let's talk about it. YouTube hitting 1,000 subscribers was just like a dream come true for me. Like I just think that by some miracle I've managed to reach people who are enjoying what I do and are subscribing. So thank you so much if you are one of those subscribers. And if you're not, definitely consider subscribing, because it's something that, I'm always working to put out content that is of use and of interest to you. And also this week, I am launching, as the birthday present to you all, I'm launching a new service, which is called the Personal Podcast Reading. And the Personal Podcast Reading is a recorded podcast, a recorded reading. The Personal Podcast Reading is a recorded reading, which is essentially just like when I used to do readings for patrons. And I would, or not just patrons, for subscribers on the podcast, I would look at their chart and I would go over it and I would talk about learning points from it and things like that. It'll be a little bit like that. You can either let me be intuitive with it and just follow what I find, or you can direct me into areas that you'd like to have more information about and understanding. So I will put a link below to that service. And and for the first, there's a handful of readings. I'm doing a special offer. So for the first month, I'm going to be offering the Personal Podcast Reading at 50% off. So make sure you get there and you book your reading. It's an introductory offer. I won't be offering it at that price ever again. So there's a handful of readings that are going to be offered at 50% off. So grab yours while it's still available. You can actually upgrade the reading to a video reading as well, a bit like on YouTube. So check out the website, because I've got this audio and video reading available to you, where I explore your chart, and it will be exclusively your chart. I won't be looking or talking about anything other than you. and my insights and what I see for you, and I'll send the recording to you. So I'm really excited to launch that reading as a gift, as a birthday incentive to everybody, and a thank you to say thank you to my subscribers, thank you to my patrons, and thank you to everybody for being here and supporting the podcast. It really, really, really means the world to me. All the lovely, kind reviews I've received, and the ratings on Spotify and iTunes, it's really made a huge difference to me. And if you haven't, please consider doing it. If you're listening to this podcast on Spotify, don't forget to take your phone out of your pocket, press the 3 little buttons on the Stellium Astrology Podcast page, and just rate my podcast and give me a little star rating, 5 if you like. I'm not trying to influence you. And if you'd like to be in with a chance of winning a gorgeous Monk's Astrology personalized birth chart or birth chart clock, all you have to do is subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you have a private channel, screenshot your subscription and email it. And if you just include your YouTube handle as well, so tell me what your channel's called, just so that if for whatever reason, I do pull your name out the hat, I can hunt you down in a few different ways to let you know you won this beautiful clock made by the very talented Catherine Monks, who creates a variety of bespoke and personalized astrological ornamental artwork, and it really is truly stunning, with Austrian crystals. It's such a beautiful little gift, or just something to have around your home. I have a clock for myself, and it really is a beautiful thing. It might be worth you having a look at the Patreon page if you haven't already, because patrons receive a discount on readings. So if you haven't already checked that out, definitely do, on top of learning content. So for the patrons, I've created mini courses or classes basically that they can study in a variety of areas. And I really enjoy creating content for the patrons. I really feel like I'm talking to my friends there, and there are just some lovely people who've come, used their discount codes and come for readings, and it's really lovely being connected to those people. So thank you to all my patrons, the existing patrons of old who are no longer with me. I fully appreciate all the support you've given me as well. Now, I thought we'd have a look at the podcast and just see if I can just share my screen. Hang on. So the podcast was launched on the 29th of July, 2020. Gosh, that year is stuck in my mind for some reason. Possibly the most depressing year in recent history, or ever. 9:38 a.m. British summertime, so universal time would be 8:38, and in Northampton in the United Kingdom. And this chart, I've done it, I think I actually, when I did the launch, I did it in the house system, was Regiomontanus. So let's change the house system to the one that I do use for, there we go, that's what I would use. So here we go. We have Regiomontanus, and the sun for the podcast is in Leo, in 6 Leo in the 11th house, reaching out to the community. And we have the moon in Sagittarius at 0 degrees, which is making a nice trine to the sun, and it's actually waxing up to a full moon. And we also have Virgo rising, and put Mercury at 18 degrees of Cancer in the 10th house, which is nice because I have my sun at 17 Capricorn. So it was nice to have Mercury opposing, to have all these inquisitive minds seeking out the information that I'm putting out. And there we have Venus up there, very close to the 10th house cusp as well, very close to the midheaven. And I obviously plugged my chart into this. I picked a favourable time for the podcast and for my chart based on the very volatile astrological weather of that year. As you can see, Jupiter, Pluto and Saturn bundled up at the bottom there in a rather malefic stellium with a little benefic flavour, with Jupiter getting involved. But they're all sitting down there. And yeah, it was difficult to really elect a good chart, but sometimes, as Frank Clifford says, sometimes electing a chart isn't about picking the perfect one, it's about avoiding a really bad one. So I knew I wanted to launch the podcast, and I thought I would do it. So this is the podcast's chart. Now, there's the solar return. So let's firstly look at the solar return. So as far as the moon is concerned, the moon is in Sagittarius again for the 3rd birthday, and actually sits on galactic center point and on the north node, the south node in Sagittarius. So the south node in the podcast's chart is at 27 Sag, which is on galactic center. Now, I have a really special connection with galactic center, and I really feel like I have Neptune there, and I really feel like it helps me to channel and to connect and to be really fluid with my insight when it comes to interpreting natal charts. I really feel that's part of it anyway. And to have the moon at 28 degrees in this year's solar return on the galactic central point, it really feels like perhaps the course of the podcast right now is on a path to being what it was born to be. In my opinion, it feels like it's kind of out of my hands, and the work that I'm doing, I've kind of set it up, and now it's ready to fall into its natural expression. Kind of like the Chariot tarot card, you can take your hands off the steering wheel, you're being guided by the stars right now, and I really feel like that with galactic center. And having the moon there, it kind of reinforces that to me. Maybe not so favorably. Venus is retrograde during this period for this year. So, it could be a year of, taking stock in some way and kind of going over things and checking that I'm still being true to what I wanted as far as the podcast is concerned. Jupiter is transiting the podcast's Uranus placement. Isn't that nice? I think that if anything, I've learned that, having a podcast that has a mutable ascendant and a mutable moon means that I've had to be adaptable. And obviously I launched the podcast during 2020, which was very, very unpredictable as far as how things were going to end up and pan out. But also during that period, well, not long after I found out I was pregnant, and so I had my baby, so I had to adapt to being a mum and pre-recording content and all of that sort of thing. So that was a really interesting time, but I maintained a presence that whole time, even though I had to adapt to the way that I was doing it. And then eventually what happened was I came back and I started working again in real time, if you will, and coming up with more ideas for the podcast and changing the where I distribute it, so putting it out to YouTube and things like that. And now I'm at a point where I'm thinking of changing, not completely changing everything again, but it's constantly evolving is what I'm trying to say. And now we've got a new phase of the evolution. But during this period, I want to make sure that I am, still giving my community what they need and what they want, and connecting with them in a way that brings us both value. So this is a good time for reflecting on that with the podcast. Mercury's going to turn retrograde, I think, when he gets to, I can't remember what degree now, 21 of Virgo, so just on the ascendant and then going back again. So Mercury, being the ruler of the podcast, being retrograde on the ascendant of the podcast, means that I might still have some rethinking to do as far as the podcast is concerned, and whether or not I'm still biting off more than I can chew, because that's a classic thing that I do, give myself far too much work and then end up feeling burnt out, which has happened to me not long ago. And look, Pluto's currently sitting on the podcast's Saturn placement in late Capricorn. So actually Pluto's here testing the durability of the podcast and its foundations, I guess, in some way, in an interesting way. So and also having Saturn in the 5th. I natally have Saturn in the 5th. And for me, that's about being very serious about my hobbies and the things that I'm interested in. So and Jupiter coming to Uranus in the 9th house in Taurus as well. So Taurus being the ruler of the throat and the voice, really. It could be that Jupiter is coming to expand the broadcasting potential, and that might be through what I'm doing through YouTube and growing that side of things. Actually, I'm able to reach farther than previously envisaged, because I was only an audio platform at that time. And though you can listen to audio episodes on YouTube, we now have the added dimension of video as well. So that's just a little look at what the solar return chart looks like as a transit to the natal. But actually, as by itself, 7 Cancer is actually rising. So 7 Cancer is rising. The sun is in the first house for the podcast, for the solar return. So this could really be about the image of the podcast. And I have been having another think about whether or not I want to, have a little look at changing the design of things and a little redesign process. Look at that. Saturn retrograde is close to the midheaven of the solar return and is actually retrograde, but it's trine the ascendant as well. So there's a nice communication between Saturn and the ascendant of the podcast. So it could really be about like defining the image of the podcast, defining exactly what the podcast, how the content is going to cater to you, the listeners and viewers over the coming year. And really, Saturn is definitive as well when it moves over the midheaven. So it could be about really establishing itself as a worthy contender among other astrology podcasts. That 28 moon in the Sag in the 6th house, I guess it means I'm going to be doing a lot of work with this on a daily basis. It's going to be what I do day in, day out. I've definitely decided recently I just want to channel more energy into this rather than spreading myself too thin. And, having lots of little pots to watch. I'm really just focusing on this one area. And then we go, Venus retrograde is now in the 2nd house of value. I guess with Venus retrograde being so tied up with Lilith and square to Uranus, there's definitely a sense of being prepared to make changes and to also be sure that I'm not tying myself into what other people want, and I'm being very true to myself about what it is I want to do. So though I have to cater to my audience, and though I have to make sure that I'm giving you guys great value, I also have to make sure that I enjoy what I'm doing in the process, or it becomes a bit of a drag. So yeah, I've got a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in my 6th house natally, which means that if things get too samey, I can get quite bored, and it can actually express as health issues as well. So I am very mindful not to make my life too samey. So that's just a little bit of a fun look at the solar return. And, I think one of the really interesting things about solar return, and one of the things that you probably have to kind of really pay attention to, is the placement of the moon, the midheaven and the ascendant. These are all things that are really important, because everything's important in a solar return because everything changes from year to year. So you see different placements and it gives you a kind of overview of how things are going to pan out for that year. But actually, when you look at the moon, that's a very much the sort of major significator for how everything's going to, like what things are going to center around. And the midheaven and the ascendant change as well. So it's kind of like, it tells you a lot about kind of what the focus is going to be and how you're going to go about it. What I like about this is my North Node is rising in this chart. So I'm definitely doing the work I've been called to do. And that's reiterated by Moon on galactic center in Sagittarius. For me personally, when I see that, I think, yes, I'm doing the work I'm supposed to be doing. And then on top of that, it's making a really nice grand fire trine to the North Node in Aries and also to Venus retrograde in Leo. So it's actually about, if we think about me launching it on YouTube, it could be that I originally recorded videos to YouTube back in 2016, I think. Was it 2016? It might have been 2014. I can't remember. I started my YouTube channel years ago. I recorded a series of videos and then I didn't get much further because I was in a place with a really bad internet connection. It was a music studio, so there was a lot of noise there. I didn't have any good lighting. I didn't have the right equipment, and the timing didn't feel right. And the fact is, I often kick myself and think, oh, why didn't I, stick at it back then? And I'd have been doing YouTube for years. And then I thought, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because everything happens when it's supposed to, how it's supposed to. It's like you just trust the timing of things, trust the flow. And that's what I have to do. And I feel like that's part of this chart, is trusting the flow and understanding that I may actually be returning to the original format that I had been drawn to initially. And that actually the work that I'm doing right now is very much there's a sense of calling. I'm satisfying a sense of calling for myself right now. And I really do enjoy doing this. It's something I love to do. So yeah, I think that it's a nice solar return chart, and actually having Jupiter Uranus in conjunction wide, actually really wide, but with Jupiter, because it's an expansive planet, you can sometimes extend the orb. And also the fact that they will be coming together and making a conjunction next year in April, that is a nice symbol for growth, and maybe unexpected growth, but definitely reaching out to a community that you believe in, they believe in you. And if we look at the fact that Jupiter rules my 6th, where the moon is for that time, and Uranus rules my 8th house, it could well be that this mystical 8th house subject and the work that I put into it reaches a community of people who really relate to what I'm saying and appreciate and reciprocate by subscribing and following the work that I do. So I'm excited about that, and I hope you enjoyed a little exploration into the solar return chart. I don't think there's anything else I need to cover other than check out the new reading that I've got. I will I'm sending out information to my newsletter subscribers, and if you're not a subscriber to the newsletter, definitely sign up. I'm often I don't send out, I won't bombard you, but I will send out information as and when I have some on upcoming offers and events and that kind of thing. Any kind of news I think that would be of use to you. And if you are interested in getting a little bit more involved and a little bit closer to what I do, come over to the Patreon page. We are in each other's pockets over there, and this Scorpio moon happens to quite like that. So yeah, come and check out the Patreon page as well, and check out the rather hefty discounts on readings you can get if you sign up to be a patron. Is that everything? I think it is. Like I said, if you don't already, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Leave a comment below. Please tell me if you've got a particular favorite episode, or if there was something that I said that helped you to connect with yourself on a deeper level through one of the subjects we explored, or just tell me what it is you're enjoying about the podcast and whether or not you've got any ideas about what you'd like me to do in its 3rd year. So thanks a lot. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.